Eamon Devlin is an adjunct professor at Oxford University, and his main role now is as founder of Minute Nine, a company he set up that offers services to coaches and teams on how best to maximize halftime. And now they're expanding a little bit to the whole game day scenario as well. So, Eamon, first of all, thanks for giving us your time and coming on today. How are you keeping?
Well, first of all, thanks, Kevin, the opportunity. Yeah, good, good. Bit hot here in Oxfordshire, but trying to survive. Not built for the heat. Otherwise, grand. Yeah, grand. Looking forward to this.
Mm. And I know you work now in a wide range of sports and stuff. Just give us your background in terms of GA. Like you're from Armagh originally, and did you have much involvement playing and coaching?
Yeah, so I grew up in a mile outside Crossmidlen, and I left sort of the South Armagh area when I was 18. To be honest, I couldn't wait to leave. That was during the Troubles, so I'm 47 years old. So yeah, the troubles were sort of in full flow then. Um, I played a bit growing up. It wasn't that good. I ended up having a couple of years as a kid in London, and when I came back, I'd sort of missed 2 years of Gaelic development. So long story, I wasn't a very good Gaelic player. So I got into coaching, and yeah, I've been involved in coaching in Gaelic for 15 years now, mainly over in England, and I took the sort of where I live in Oxfordshire, the county team is actually called Hertfordshire. So I took those lads for 3 years, stood down last year. So yeah, yeah. So it's my home sport, Kevin. So it's my favourite sport,
Mm.
probably the sport I feel most home in. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of funness for Gaelic.
Mm. And just to give us a bit of background, then I mentioned the company is called Minute Nine. Can you just take us through your journey, maybe from when you're working as a lawyer to the line of work that you're in now?
I'll give you the abridged version, Kevin.
Mm.
The I was a, yeah, I was worked in finance. A very fortunate career. Worked all over the world. Wasn't particularly a good lawyer, but I was able to stay awake, which is quite important for a corporate finance lawyer. And then one day I just couldn't do it. I kind of, to be blunt, got burnt out and decided to do something different. Ended up getting quite ill actually, sort of mentally to be blunt. And so I had a lot of help, and that's when I fell into psychology. I realized that I was quite interested in how the brain operated, why we think certain ways. So transferred from the legal industry to psychology. Did an online master's in Brunel College London, and then for my dissertation, I was scratching my baldy head to see what I should do, and all the subjects that the teachers give me I didn't really like or understand, to be honest. And then was looking at the list of things that I've got a list of things that I'm not very good as a coach. And that list as I still have the list. It gets longer every year, and on the list was halftime. And I wonder how you give a good halftime talk. And then linked to that, my daughter, sort of the year before that, had left soccer. She were living in Switzerland at the time. She had a very bad experience in a football team, and the more the team lost, more the coaches shouted at these under 11 girls. And one of the one of the match talks, was 9 minutes long. And actually, after that particular 9 minute sort of berating, she left. So that's why the business is called Minute Nine.
Mm, mm. And look, we get into all that, and there's a lot of different fascinating areas I want to dive into with you. Just to give us an idea of the sort of teams and individuals that you've worked with over the last while, can you list out a few just to give us a sense of the kind of people and teams you've been involved with?
So we work across four sports, although probably a fifth. We're about to start a project in Formula One. But the four ones we've done most of in invasion sports are basketball, NBA basketball. So we work for two of the NBA teams, one of which is a team called Miami Heat. Secondly, is Gaelic. So we this year we work for Laois, Sligo, and Meath, all in the football side, and we work for one of the hurling teams as well. Fortunately, they're out of the championship. And then on the football side, we work for two of the Premiership clubs, including Brighton first teams. And then internationally, we work for Brazil. So we did actually three projects for Carlo Ancelotti when he was at Real Madrid, and then he's since moved on to international level. So we've got some ongoing work with them, and then got some teams in the US. Got some small teams as well, like local Oxford City team and United, which is down the
Mm.
road from me. And then missing one. We're missing. Aussie Rules. So we do some work with Aussie Rules.
Mm.
We just work with the Brisbane Lions. That's it.
Brilliant.
Oh, sorry,
And
rugby. Sorry, apologies. Rugby.
yeah,
Rugby. Uh, it's rugby. Not very many clients in rugby. We did some work with Stuart Lancaster when he was in Paris, although when we got involved, about 3 weeks later, he got fired, so that's not a good omen. And then we work for the Argentinian national team. So we started working with them in December. We've got a team of 9 of us now. We've got some ongoing work for them, and we're over in Dublin for the Lions game. So we were there for 2 days working with Felipe and his team. So that's it.
mm. And like when you're choosing this research paper initially, I'm sure you did sort of see a gap in the market in terms of there hadn't been many other research papers done around, I suppose, specifically the area of the halftime talk. But does it surprise you how quickly this has taken off for you? You know, teams in these high performance environments are always looking for the extra 1%, but it seems to have been a gap in the market there that you've managed to exploit that hadn't been there previously.
A lot of luck, Kevin, to be honest. There's just an area, it's a part of sport which, by the way, I'm not the first person to think of, can we do halftime differently? But I think from a research point of view, it was definitely underexplored. There are only 9 published papers in halftime, and that's of all sports, both genders, all levels. So to put into context, there'll be 500 research papers on hamstrings and
Mm.
S&C recoveries. So having 9 hopefully I'll be the 10th. I did one in Gaelic football actually, which I'm hoping, touch wood, is about to get published. Although um, you never quite know it, getting an article published. That was on interviewing elite Gaelic football players. So everybody in the study had one or more Celtic crosses. So
Okay.
that was asking for elite Gaelic players and winning Gaelic players who'd at the highest level for their experience at halftime. Yeah, I've been surprised, Kevin, won't lie. I mean, I completely switched career, and we've been very fortunate to get the trust of some interesting groups. Um, but a lot of wasn't a lot of pushback as well. I mean, not every session goes well that we have with teams. Find a lot of reluctance in certain areas, particularly some in soccer. But we all like a challenge, don't we? If you're listening to
Mm.
this podcast, you like a challenge because you want to get better.
Yeah, and I heard you mention before that I think the first time you worked with Carlo Ancelotti, they were drawing 0-0 at Barcelona half time and they lost the game 4-0. So you have to have a certain amount of buy-in from the coaches as well that they actually go, okay, this isn't an instant fix here, and they will look at a more medium to long term view.
Yeah, that was in October last year. So at the time, there's only 3 of us in the team. We'd gone over to Madrid for, was it 2 or 3 days, just to kind of understand the group, the Ancelotti, the father and son, Davide and Carlo, and also meet the other coaches, meet some of the players. It was actually international breaks. We met Mbappe and Vinicius Junior and other players. To be honest, I don't really follow soccer, so I mean, I knew
Mm.
Mbappe, I knew of him, but I didn't know the rest of them. But we just kind of did quite a bit of big work project to try to redesign their half time, and then when they put it in place was for their home, big game, Galacticos game against Barca at home. I think at that stage Real Madrid hadn't lost a game at home in, I don't know, I can't remember what it was, but it's been a long time.
Mm.
Got to 0-0 half time, and I remember myself and the other 2 colleagues were texting each other thinking, right, this is great. This is when our protocol is going to kick in, and they lost 4-0, and I was expecting a phone call next week from somebody at the club to say we'd been fired, and we weren't. Basically, the learning point I took from that was, Ancelotti basically works in 12-week cycles. So if he sees a problem, he tries to then find some solutions to it. And by the way, I don't think we have all the solutions. In fact, I think we've probably got more questions than answers, if I'm being honest with you. So, but yeah, he believes that you make a decision on something and a problem you want to fix. You got a solution that you feel comfortable with, and you run with it for 3 months, and then revise it. But
Mm.
that takes a very strong-minded coach, right, to kind of really believe you to buy into your own decision.
Yeah. And just before we jump into a bit more detail on these things, when you're talking about working with different coaches, like say comparing Ancelotti to maybe Felipe Contepomi or NBA coaches that you work with, is there any similarities? Are they very different in terms of how they think, how they even take on information like this? Do they have their own opinions? What's it been like just to mix with these world class coaches in different sports?
The thing that really binds them all, and actually it wasn't me that spotted it. It was a guy called Chris Brady, who is the autobiographer for Carlo Ancelotti, Professor Chris Brady. He mentioned to me is curiosity. The coaches we work with are, I'll be honest, they're phenomenally, they just go to the end of the earth to get more knowledge and information. Work extremely hard. I mean, international breaks, they work, you know, um, very hard trying to get an edge. So they're very open-minded. They're also challenging. I think the really good coaches are challenging. So when we went to a workshop or so get a presentation, the really good ones are challenging. So like, well, why do you say that, Eamon? Well, why is that correct? I don't believe you, or I think this is true. And so I think they're the one. I think that's that sets them apart, and also they have an ability to make people feel welcome and respected.
Mm.
So all of them, yeah, I would say that to make you feel like look, I'm a nobody in sport, and all of those coaches when I first met them, they make you sort of feel that you're wanted and you're part of the group, and then lo and behold, that then you try hard for them. And all my team, they all I think they all like working the projects. I think because we are, yeah, I think the coaches we work with are open-minded. And we're not for everybody, right? Our system is not for everybody, and that's fine. But the ones we work with, I think, are extremely. They go to the severe lengths to get an edge.
Yeah, and I'm sure they have a good bullshit radar as well. That there's loads of people in different fields that they potentially are interested in bringing in and seeing what they can learn off them. But I'm sure they they understand this works and they understand there's real value to working with you or to bringing in your team and see what you provide as well. So um, yeah, I'm interested in that side of things as well, the kind of how they challenge you and how they can detect pretty early on, okay, this guy's talking sense. This is actually something that can help our team.
Yeah, look, and everything, so I've made lots of mistakes, Kevin, lots of mistakes. One example, I could give you 20, is I thought we could design, we focus on halftime for a second. I thought we could design a system, a protocol, which we tested with various players, and but then sort of try to use the same system in different sports, and then quickly realize that's not going to work.
Mm.
So to put more detail on that, uh, I have a personal bias towards, halftime. Players should be frankly left alone for a lot of the break, so they can rest and settle and what we call land. As a unit, they need time to kind of come off the high of playing in front of X thousand people, and in some cases being shouted at positively or negatively. But for certain, like football, soccer, if you look at the academy system in England, a lot of these players haven't had a chance to speak. It's a highly controlled environment. Not all of
Mm.
them, but a number of them are. And so a lot of players are not used to speaking. So frankly, leaving alone for like 7 to 9 minutes without any training is borderline reckless. So that was one of my sort of steep learning points.
Okay, that's interesting. What would be the biggest mistake that you would see coaches make from your research and working with teams when they come in at halftime? Is there any one handful of things that are no-nos when it comes to dealing with a halftime team talk?
Well, if I sort of flip it on its head, if I may, so we ask a lot of coaches. We've interviewed a lot of coaches. Or, I'm doing a PhD in this. Um, you know, uh, some coaches are well known, some are not known. Uh, and I asked them, what do they find difficult at halftime? And often, number one is emotional regulation, their own emotional regulation. So if a coach goes into a room to try to address, his or her players, and the fight or flight button has been pressed, very difficult to connect with the players. So that's one is coaches going in before they've landed in the
Mm.
dressing room. And I think in my experience that ends up being more damaging than positive. And then the other thing is, and to be honest, coaches know this already. I think listening to this is how many messages coaches give. So people will always tell me, I mean, yeah, I know this. We should only give 2 or 3 messages. And you go, okay. And then we get the tape sent through, or we're in the room, the dressing room, and then we give them a report and go, Kevin, today you give your players 26 messages. And they go, that's not true. I said, well, okay, here's the transcript. And so when people talk about 2 or 3 points, what they mean is 2 or 3 concepts.
Mm.
But if you're talking about your press and your kick out, it may be that you need to give 6 different messages, right, to 6 different forwards, to try to quote fix the press. So that's 6 messages you've given out, not one. Would always encourage Kevin. The best piece of advice you can ever give a coach, I think, is to just video themselves, video their own performance. In fact, we don't get involved with the team unless the coaches have viewed their own performance themselves.
Okay.
And that's the other thing, another mistake we've learned, because we think unless a coach is willing to look at their own performance, then it's probably a waste of, frankly, the county boards or federation's money speaking to a baldy, man from Armagh and his team. So I think and it's tough, right? Who likes looking at themselves? I mean, we are programmed not to let sound of our own voice. So it's not easy, but I think it's probably a worthwhile exercise just to kind of view your own performance. Like Argentina, we're doing a report now for them, and one of the things we're going to say in the report is like put a camera in the coach's box, and just all the coaches should watch back what they did during the game.
Mm. And I remember something you were saying about rugby when the coaches are in the coach's box that they tend to be able to emotionally regulate themselves better than a coach that's on the sideline. Is that something that your research has shown?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can see it yourself, can't you? I mean, any person watches a rugby game. I mean, they are literally, 100 plus meters away on from the pitch.
Mm.
What I didn't know till quite recently is that in rugby, at least at test level, you're not allowed to, the coaches are not allowed to communicate directly with the players on the pitch. So messages have to come on via the med team or, some other runner. So I think there's a helpful separation. And it doesn't mean that coaches don't get, wound up, frankly, because I'm in the coach's box, and I've seen that quite recently. But still, I think there's a helpful. The alternative is, right, you're in the technical area, which our Gaelic coaches will be. We did one recently, a study, and I think the manager, head coach, had walked 1.5 miles in the first half,
Well,
and he'd given out, I can't remember the exact number, but it was a high number of messages. Yeah, there was over 100 in the first half.
mm.
And so often we just say to coach, look, this is what you did. This is this is what these are the behaviors that you demonstrated. And then it's letting coaches decide, is that what you want to do as a head coach? So often it's just when we go into a team, Kevin, we just take a picture. I say there's 3 of us taking loads of data points, and it's not very fancy. It's like 3 people with a pen and paper. And we do that because and we don't use cameras because we want to see what we can understand in the moment. Because players haven't got the chance, right, to look back at the halftime talk or the pre-game meeting or, what's. And so often we struggle to write down what's going on, number of messages. And so we report back to coach, look, you're paying us to be here to kind of understand what's happening, and we're struggling to understand what's happening.
Mm.
So how's a player who's just played, 35 minutes of Gaelic and has had a rough time against Mark and, David Clip. So like, how does he then find the headspace to go and listen to, 20 plus messages during the break?
Mm. Just like obviously, there's only a certain amount players can retain from a manager when they speak at half time. Is there, when you look at GA in particular, is there any, should there be more of a focus on the emotional side, the tactical side at half time, or does it very much depend on the game scenario and then also the individuals? Is there any kind of any data, or what would you advise around that sort of thing?
Yeah, I should explain, Kevin, that Gaelic, look, I'm generalizing here, and we haven't worked with, lots of teams we haven't worked with, the ones we have worked with. But as a general observation, the standards of Gaelic half times are high and good. And what I mean by that is, a lot of them have given, a lot of the coaches we work with have given half time a lot of thought. So we're often just tweaking stuff as opposed to like the Real Madrid example, they had no protocol whatsoever.
Right.
And that's very usual in soccer, highly usual, which is kind of, you think about it logically, you look at a training schedule for Brentford, it's timed to an inch of its life the entire week. You get to half time, it just seems to be, it's whatever, the head coach thinks is right in the moment. So I think, yeah, so it's having a protocol makes good sense. And I think a coach can do it themselves, ideally with the players involved. One of our big um, principles is we believe that the game day is for the players and everything should be built around that.
Mm.
Which not every coach believes in, and that's fine. Every coach can have their own view, but that's one of our founding principles, is the match day is for the players. And so therefore, how do you design a halftime without players? So we insist some of the players are involved in the design of the pre-game and halftime.
Mm.
Because I don't know your players, right? I never met your player. Like until I've met them, I haven't met them. So I think managers can do it in the off season. I think it's an interesting exercise to do. You could do you could do it yourself. You don't need to have a outside person do it. And it's what Clive Woodward did in 2001 when he realised his team was performing not so great in the third quarter. He realised what happens before that, half time, and he just gave everyone a blank piece of paper and go, right, we've got 900 seconds at half time. He said Martin Johnson and some of the coaches, I think he gave them 2 days and go, right, if we had a blank piece of paper, how would we fill it for half time? So we do a lot of things in sport because that's what was happened before. But is that the right way in 2025? The world, as everyone knows listening to this, has significantly changed in the last 20 years. Player attitudes, what's tolerated, what's not tolerated. So by de facto, when you look at a warm-up, like 20 years ago, what it is today, 20 years ago, it wasn't probably much of a warm-up. So yeah, sport evolves and maybe halftime should evolve as well.
Mm. One thing I always enjoyed being in football dressing rooms was the being broken into smaller groups. So say the backs will sit together, the forwards will sit together, and then the management give you a couple of minutes before they come in at half time so you can have a chat. What does the research say around when players actually talk to each other at half time and have those few minutes together and then maybe potentially have breakout groups or whatever it is? Is that something you'd recommend as well?
Yeah, so from the analysis we've ran with interviewing players, player on player feedback ranks just as high, if not higher, than feedback from a coach at halftime. Assuming the player giving the feedback is respected by the person receiving it.
Mm.
Let's say, Kevin, you're a captain of the team, and I'm one of your cornerbacks, and I've had a terrible day at the office. Frankly, you grabbing me and saying, Devlin, you need to pull your socks up. In that moment, I'm more likely to believe you as captain than I am a former player who didn't play the game for 30 years. Because, we're both on the field together. The difficulty is when the coaches come in, and of course there are exceptions to this, the players don't give any more player-on-player feedback.
Okay.
So, and that's something we've definitely noticed in, I'd say, I don't say elite. I think the word elite's been totally hijacked in my view. Let's go with high-performing teams. The accountability, the ability to hold each other to account is very high,
Mm.
and that is often from players. So that,
Yeah.
yeah. And then breaking up. It also depends on the group, Kevin. One thing we've noticed, generally speaking, is players are saying less. Like we track word count in the sports I mentioned. And I guess most of our data now is probably soccer, but players are saying less. Coming out the headphones, they're communicating less with each other and the coaches, which we think is not a great trend because you're about to play, a game of football where you're going to make at least 2,500 decisions during the game.
Mm.
Some of them you got to be connected if you're in the back four. So not communicating with your players, with your fellow teammates before the match is not a good sign. So if your team is quiet, then yeah, breaking people into units generally increases volume of words. But it needs practiced. So another idea for coaches is, I think, during a small-sided game, blow the whistle. You could do a mini halftime and go, right, gentlemen, ladies, you got 2 minutes. Let's do, break into units as you suggested. Ideally, the players have questions to think about because if you just, a lot of coaches will ask, Kevin, how do you feel about the game? I think I don't think it's a great question to ask players because it's such a wide, you could get anything from, someone commenting on the referee to somebody in the crowd annoying them, whatever. So having more focus, like, if it's a very quiet group, I think a good question is, right, gentlemen, tell me what number player in the opposition is causing us most damage today? Like, what position is he in, and what can we do to counteract that?
Mm.
So the narrower the question, you're more likely to get a response. Whereas if a coach asks anything you saw, um, any questions is a no-no, I think, because I think it's lazy, I think, actually, to asking people any questions because the easiest thing is to say nothing, and then there's no more talking.
Mm. Is there any advice you'd give? Like, what does a good, say from a coach's perspective, the halftime whistle goes? What would best practice be in a GA context around this is how you deliver a good team talk from how long do you wait to go in? How many minutes do you speak for? That kind of thing. Is there best practice around that?
Yeah, I think, and that's another mistake I made, was being too fixed and kind of the mindset. I thought we worked out some magical protocol and everyone should do it, and I've learned the hard way. That's not correct. The way I'd flip it, Kevin, if I may, and just probably the questions that coaches, because the coaches will know the answers to these questions. I won't because I've never met the group of players that they're managing. Question one is, how long do you think it takes the players to properly, to land in the dressing room? For some people, it might be 2 minutes. For others, like I think at the very highest level, it takes quite a long time because their heart rate's at such a high rate. So how long does it take the players for the players to properly rest and recover, and also for the coach or the coaching in the back room stuff how long does it take them to kind of properly consume what happened in the first half, get their videotape clips ready or whatever visuals they have. Also another question is, do you want the players to help solve the problems at halftime? Because I assume that everyone does, and then I realize actually that's not the case. A lot of coaches don't want really the players to say anything. And again, so the question we'd ask coaches then is, do you want the players to help solve the problems? Because if you do, then you probably need to give them some space. And as I said, some set questions to work through, which needs practice during the week. And then thirdly is impact. So we measure, so that all our professional teams, we measure the impact of halftime. And we measure the first 15 minutes at the beginning of the second half. We don't measure whether or not the game is won or lost because there are, as you know, 500 things which impact outcome of a game, if not more. But we do measure the first 15 minutes. So things like sprint times, we look at number of mistakes made, we look at discipline record. And critically, we look at, well, the messages you give your players, Kevin, can we see them being implemented on the pitch?
Mm.
So we always say, look, a really good halftime team talk, at least from the technical side, it should be someone in the crowd should be able to spot what the manager said. because it's obvious what the change that he or she has just made.
Mm.
So, and then that boils down to, it's a very long-winded answer, isn't it?
No,
Is,
no.
is impact. So, uh, it's hard to have impact, Kevin, when you talk a lot.
Yeah, and it does the whole, like, obviously the use of mobile phones and stuff now, and we hear about attention spans drop. Does that impact it as well? That you need to keep it more concise and limited? I think you mentioned earlier a couple of concepts. What impact does that have?
Look, I think coaches themselves know that, don't they? And the society, not just young people. I think, look at it, anybody's, and an interesting, exercise to do is off season is just everyone get their phones out and go, right, let's get our phone usage out here. Let's get the average screen time.
Mm.
Let's see what we're dealing with. I think I think that probably could tell you a lot.
Yeah.
Now, the other, obviously the half time in sort of club level is 10 minutes, but intercounty is actually it's actually more like 20 minutes now. If you look at sort of some of the recent Gaelic games, it's more like 20 minutes to half time,
Yeah.
which I think, by the way, is a no-no personally. I mean,
Yeah.
if it was me, I think half time should be 10 minutes.
Just one question that struck me there. That is an interesting one now around. I always, just from personal experience playing, I always prefer to be the second team that came out onto the pitch. So, you get the bang on the dressing room and um, the referee's blowing the whistle, whatever. We'll say, no, wait, let them go out first. Let them wait for us. They're standing around, say, lined up in their
Yeah.
15. We come out then to the roar of the crowd, or whatever. I don't know, is there research around that either? Does it make a difference if a manager holds them in a bit later and they come out? Is there anything around that?
Well, there are some examples. Ferguson was big at that, wasn't he? He would always make sure that the team was, this idea that, that they'll wait for me. I think McGuinness does it as
Mm,
well.
yeah.
Um, I'm not aware of any research per se on that, but I think it does anything like, it shows that, that you're going to wait for us. Um, the flip side of that is, I always get, so when we ask coaches, tell me the struggles you have at halftime. I mentioned emotional regulation. Another one is lack of time. And that always, sort of, my heart always sinks when I see that answer. Like you're thinking, what do you need more time for?
Mm,
That, and what happens is the speeches have gone on too long, Kevin.
mm.
And then you've got the whole backroom staff and the whole circus in there. I mean, we didn't work for the Lions on this tour, but they had 51 staff members. I mean, not all directly, but 51. They had 3 buses pull up in the Aviva. So I'll let you decide if that's helpful or not.
Yeah, but even say in a club context, like even a senior club team now will have 10 and up members of the backroom team. Would you advise that everyone's not going into the dressing room then at half time? It's the manager and a couple of coaches.
Well, the litmus test, and by the way, we've made ourselves very unpopular with some coaches, Kevin. Going back to the principle, who's game day for? We believe it's for players.
Mm,
And okay, if people believe that, then half time is no different. This is for the players. The litmus test we run in is if you being in the room has an impact positively on the players, then you stay in the room. If not, then you shouldn't be in the room.
okay.
And so, and that's tough, right? Because look, people want to be in that room. People want me. It's probably the most interesting room, arguably, in the whole stadium. Um, and I get it, right? You've got coaches who've been there, on the cold, December evening, running around, and then they're kind of excluded from it. But that's why I think it involved players. If you involve the group in designing this, as opposed to just like the head honcho walking in one day and go, right, I've heard this idea and we're going to do this. I think that's a very dangerous. I wouldn't recommend that, frankly,
Mm,
because you're potentially going to alienate people.
yeah.
And um and so when we look at, to give you an example, when we do these what's called game day reviews, there's usually 3 of us from the team go in, and we're there the entire day. We're there from so with Argentina, for example, we met the team at the Radisson Blue. We're there from 9 o'clock in the morning, and we signed off at I think 1:35 the next day in the morning. So we're there with the team the entire day, and we analyze and record everything we can with pen and paper. So how the players are getting on, breakfast, What are they eating? What are the activations like? What are the, what team talks are they having? Of course, very little in rugby on match day. We're looking at the warm up, looking at the pre-game speech from Felipe, and then looking at in-game communication. So all this gets analysed, and then including at half time. So one of our jobs is to look at the staff, and we purposely don't want to really know what people do in advance because one of our jobs is go right. Is it obvious to what Kevin O'Brien has done today for the team?
Mm.
And to be honest, if it wasn't obvious to us, then we recommend that Kevin shouldn't be in the team that day from a staff point of view. Which is to say, we've made some very unpopular recommendations.
Yeah, and I want to get to the whole game day situation because I think there's loads in that as well to delve into. Just a final one at the half time. Is there still a value in a manager just flipping the lid and an emotional team talk, shouting and screaming? I was in a dressing room last year, just for context, and I think we were 5 or 6 points down at half time, and the coach came in and just flipped, and it worked. It was something that we needed. The team was maybe flat and playing under par, and you could see the difference in the second half. But then I'd imagine for every one of those, there's probably a handful of occasions where it doesn't work. So would you keep more to practical instructions, or is there
Yeah.
still a value in the more emotional response from a coach?
Yeah, I think so. The paper I mentioned, we're hopefully getting it published. I'm very happy to send the kind of manuscript copy if anybody wants to read it. Um, by the way, it's quite long. I think it's interesting, but I would say that what that paper says is if the trust level is high between the players and the coach, then the classic hair dryer treatment can be impactful. The difficulty is about impact levels.
Mm.
So if you do it very often, then it's just what the manager does, and the impact level goes down significantly. So it's really about whether or not the manager is trusted by the group, and
Yeah.
that's hard to measure, right? But if the trust level is high, then the players will know why he's doing it. He's doing it out of love, frankly.
Mm.
He's doing it because that's what's needed. He's not doing it to be popular. Um, I think another way of doing it is a coach manager is showing his disappointment. I wonder if that's more of an appropriate way in 2025.
Yeah, so it's like the whole parent, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed
Yeah.
thing that actually will strike a
Yeah,
bit
I mean,
deeper.
gentlemen, I really thought we had the game plan understood today. We had a meeting on Friday. We went through it for an hour. All these great backroom team. You train really hard. We get to the match day, and this happens. I'm really lost of what to do now. I thought everyone we was on the same page. We hit our numbers, running and stuff, and then this happens. I'm just really, really shocked and disappointed.
Mm.
I'm not even sure
Yeah.
where to start in fixing this. But my feeling is that you've got us into this, and I think you should get us out of it and walk out. Now that, like all these things, some people may like that, might not, but I think disappointment is just an area people to consider.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Just to go to for a minute to say match day, and like I used to work as a sports journalist, so I would have covered the Dublin football team a lot,
Yeah.
and that won the six in a row, and would have dealt a lot with Jim Gavin over the years. And his philosophy on shouting instructions was that if I have to shout onto the pitch to my players, I haven't prepared them properly in training. But then you look at someone like Damien Duff recently, who resigned as Shelbourne manager, and his whole thing was he would almost coach the players through the game. He was very vocal. He was shouting instructions the whole time. What do you kind of recommend? Is it a mix of the two? If a coach is shouting instructions constantly, does it kind of the players don't take as much responsibility on the pitch? Do you have any feelings around that?
Very good question, Kevin. Yet another mistake I've made. I thought, you know, like I'm a coach myself, and I generally wouldn't say very much during a game, for the reason that you mentioned about like I think it's the players. If I'm shouting on a lot of technical information, then why don't I do that on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday night? I think with football, with soccer, I think it is different culturally. Okay, so if you track back into the system that young players came through in the academy system, highly, often highly controlled. The players are used to hearing the voice.
Mm.
Um, we, but the other question we would then say to football managers is like, okay, but how much impact do you think you're having? Like today, like in football, we're averaging now, I think it's 460 messages by a manager, a football manager in the game. Now that's verbal and hand, like sort of non-verbal gestures. So over 400 in 90 plus minutes. So, um, how much of those are being received by the players? An interesting thing to do, I think, for any coach is to do if your games are recorded, just look at how often your players are looking over to the sideline
Mm.
during a match.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
that's
look
an
at that,
interesting one.
and then just let coaches decide. Like, do you want your players to look to you for the answers? And by the way, a coach may want that, and that's you're the coach, you're a manager, you're in charge. I get it, but just a question to ask, like, is that what you want from your players? And that may be, if that's the case, then I would say continue, shouting on instructions.
Mm.
But if you really want, the Jim Galvin one where, they, that they were very self-sufficient, right, as a group.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
interviewed some of the players in that group and they were very self-sufficient because Galvin want to kind of wean himself off, right? To kind of control until he get the match day. That the players, Jim Galvin at halftime hardly said anything. Really.
really.
The All Blacks are the same. I mean, we got a tape from the not the current. We don't work for the current All Black team, but we've seen some. We had to check sometimes, but actually the coach is in the room today because they haven't said anything.
Right.
So,
And
so
Jim Gavin then was it instructions? Was it the players talking? Was it coaches? What did that look like in the Dublin dressing room?
yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't interview Jim.
Yeah.
Tried to get to him, but wasn't successful. But I did interview some of his players in that sort of was it 5 in a row, 6 in a row, 6 in a row.
6 in a row, yeah, but he
Yeah.
was there for five.
Yeah. And so, oh yeah, it was Desi took over, wasn't he, for the last one?
Mm.
So uh, yeah, that they had a very structured, small groups as you mentioned, um, yeah, focusing on the second half.
Mm.
Like that's another tip I think for any coach, any level is can we focus here on what to do in the second half? Because a lot of if you look at the transcripts, a lot of what people say is just like a bad journalistic summary of the first half.
Mm.
And people's memories, as you well know from journalism, is very challenged during a game. Very
Yeah,
challenged. Like what
yeah,
people saw is like you could. And I know this when we went to a match. They mentioned there's three of us. I get the reports too, and sometimes I think, like, shit, we all watching different games here, and like we're getting paid to do this. We're getting okay at it. So it's a yeah focus. So that's why we say like in the little protocols, we generally suggest that it's like in the second half, what should we do?
yeah.
And just keep people on the forward, like, okay, what's the next 30 minutes to do?
Mm. Just to go to the whole game day situation, I remember talking to David Fitzgerald a few years ago when he was managing Wexford, and his big thing on match day was he actually wouldn't speak to the team in the dressing room before the game. The players would play music, the players would just be relaxed. There'd be no team talk before the game, and they would go out and play. And he spoke around this after they won Leinster, so it probably got a bit of publicity, and people were saying it's kind of a mad thing for a coach to do. But um, I just thought it was a really interesting way to approach it. He'd done all his talk during training midweek. The team were very clear on how they were going to play, their tactics and everything like that. And they would listen to music, go out onto the pitch, relaxed, have a bit of fun, and then go out and play the game. So, have you seen other examples of that? Is that common? What would the psychology around that be? Do you think?
Well, and one way to sort of address that answer is this idea of do you want players to play on instinct or overthink stuff?
Hmm.
I mean, Kevin, did you still play? You still a player?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm injured at the moment, but yeah, I hope to get back soon. Yeah.
I mean, can you describe to me very briefly like, your best game of Gaelic football? Like, what was your mindset like?
Yeah, I remember I got a touch of the ball early. I did a couple of good things. I kicked a good score, and then I was just like in a flow, wasn't thinking, just enjoying the game. And after the game, you're like, it went so quick, and you're in the moment.
So you're in, so therefore you're playing an instinct,
Yeah,
an instinct. You're trusting your your skills. You've done the hard work, and now you're there just to perform. So that's the question we'd ask to coaches: is how much thinking do you want your players to be doing in the game or even before the game? And look at rugby as an extreme. They have no team talks right on match day. They might have a like a manager's for like a sort of rousing up type thing before the kick off. But there's no tactical talk. Team is named on Tuesday, Wednesday. Um, Captain's runs the day before. Whereas in soccer, you're still looking at most teams having sometimes naming the team 2 hours before the match still, including some very well-known managers doing that, and having a team meeting, which by the way is not a meeting because it's just a lecture
mm.
of we keep some stats on that. It's can be 6 minutes to 25 minutes long. Normally 6 clips, 20 slides in a PowerPoint. So it's just a question that could, again, I haven't got the whether or not to what state do you get your players into, and if some people would argue that if you're overthinking stuff, then that's certainly not flow like. It's not the
Yeah.
state you're in your best game.
Yeah. Another thing then around like I'm sure something you would be conscious of as well is like a state of arousal. So I've definitely done it in the past where I've got too hyped up too early and possibly draining yourself of energy. But then there's other times maybe when you were too relaxed, too close to the game. Is there, say if you take GA as context, is there a time when you're like maybe just before the warm up starts where it's now we're switched on, we're focused, we're not chatting anymore, or what do you think around that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I've got a good answer to it. Well, I've not got a good answer to any of your questions, Kevin.
No, they're all good.
It's what we call the switch. So one of the things we look for in our game day reviews is when we think as a little team, the three of us, when we think the switch has happened. So when has the switch gone on? When has the team gone from like, having a crack to like, right, eyes on, game face, focus? Um, and we try and agree when we think that happened as a group. So for some teams, frankly, it happens at the hotel, like before they got on the bus to go to the stadium. And then the question I would ask coaches then is do you think that's at the right time? Do the sort of the kickoff is throw in may not be for another 3 hours yet. Um, there's a concept called a shoot around in basketball, which you and others may be aware of.
Mm.
The shoot around happens on the day of an NBA game, and that happens at the stadium. The players have an hour. Each team has an hour at the stadium where the game will be that night, and teams kind of just mess around. If you look at what they do for an hour, okay, there's some set work, but it's mainly, and that's born out of teams finding a way of sort of burning up nervous energy, or having a better use of their time, and so they decided to actually just play, just have fun.
Mm.
And so that's another question is to coaches is when you think your team when is the switch being turned on? And I think you can manipulate it by having a ritual. And, and the ritual may be, and by the way, this is better if it comes from the group or from the players and group players that you're managing. But the switch could be maybe just before you go out to the warm up, maybe stand in a circle and, you have a certain set of words you say, or there could be, a certain song that you play. You mentioned music. We're a big believer in using music, by the way.
Right.
The two things I'm very sure on is playing music really helps, the right music, and then a physical re-warm up at halftime. Probably the two things I feel most comfortable saying. Having an exercise to get re-warmed up again. Um, so having a ritual, and I think, yeah, the really high-performing teams, it's obvious they have a ritual. I mean, the obvious one in rugby is obviously the hack, that's public. But there are teams who have rituals hidden away right in the dressing room. And I
Mm.
think any team could have a ritual. And there's some very good research to suggest that binds a team together. And maybe that's the moment when players then realize, okay, this is when we go out from Kevin O'Brien individual to be Kevin O'Brien, the player for this team.
Yeah, and yeah, that's interesting. And when you talk about then the re warm up at halftime, what does that look like?
Uh, well, again, we've probably made ourselves very unpopular with this, but so we one of our teams S&C, so we try and get 90 seconds for teams to re-warm up.
Like so, they go back onto the pitch and then they do it then.
Yeah, so if you look at Derry, did Derry actually we did a bit Derry, if you look at it was on GAA Go or RTE, it's public, so said their their last one that are yeah, if you look at the pitch, they were on the pitch for 90 seconds or about that before beginning of the second half. Other teams do it, in the activation rooms in Croker or in the dressing room.
Mm.
Um, and again, it's just a question for coaches. Like, would you go to the gym and do 35 minutes of like hierarchy, pretty high intensive stuff, then just sit in the corner with your phone, or just even if you're doing the phone, would you lie in the corner basically and then go right? Time to go back to stage two. Um, So it's a question really, you're expecting your players to be up to full pace when the ball is thrown in. What have you done to help your players get to that level?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. As an S&C coach now, that's definitely something I'm going to take on board. Just a final one for you. You've been great with your time. Is there any other little quick tips around how teams approach the day in general, the game day scenario before the game, or anything like that?
I think it's making it relaxed as possible. There is just be cognizant of how much information the players are giving. And I get it. Look, if you're a club team, you haven't got your players full time. But is there ways of I think what works, useful as for a championship game. A lot of managers listening to this will be listening coming up to Champo. Is maybe if you have the team talk or the team meeting, is it possible to do it on the Friday night and then have a recap the day of the match where the captain or the vice captains basically summarize what they heard the night before or that 2 days ago. And the idea is not to kind of call people out, but look at gentlemen, we're doing it this way because I want to check your understanding. And look, if we're not on the same page now, we still got 2 hours before the kickoff throw in. So it's more about this idea that um yeah, handing the sort of keys of the game over to the players. And to what extent do you think that should be done as a coach? And then if you think that's right, then what are you doing to kind of more empower the players? And this is not easy stuff, Kevin, because we're into a lot of young people now are very quiet. Is there a confidence issue going on? I don't know, but I think there's a way of doing it still, but it involves thoughtful planning, and I think it ultimately involves the coaches stepping out of the shadow to let the players lead. But it does take time. I don't think it's easy.
Mm. Yeah, that was top class, Eamon. I'm sure there'll be a lot of coaches listening back through this now with a pen and notepad in hand and just trying to sum up everything that you put into that. But there's loads there that I think coaches can take on board and stuff. And yeah, you've a really interesting role and I guess position that you're working in at the moment. So thanks a million for giving us your time
No,
and best
well,
of luck.
thanks for listeners for giving their time. Hopefully, something was of use. Yeah, and yeah, happy to chat to any coaches in due course. Yeah, best of luck.
Yeah, and I'll link your stuff in the show notes there as well, so people can get onto your website. But thanks very much.
Thanks, Kevin.